So I often get asked, why do two negative numbers multiply to give a positive number? But no one ever asks, why do two positive numbers multiply together to give a positive number? Maybe people have an intuition that you've got positive groups of something, so you end up with a positive answer. But I think if we sort of step this out, starting with why do two positive numbers multiply to give a positive number, we'll eventually get to an understanding of why when you multiply two negative numbers, you actually get a positive number. So let's start with the simpler question. Why do two positive numbers multiply to give a positive number? Well, if you can imagine here, if we did something, if we represented 2 multiplied by 3 visually, well, we'd say we've got two groups represented by the green circles, and then we've got these blue counters, which are positive 1 each. So what we're saying is two groups of 3, everything's positive, so everyone's happy. So we're saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 2 multiplied by 3 is just another quick way of saying two groups of 3, so 3 plus 3, which is 6. Okay, then let's think a little bit more complicated. Let's think, why does a positive number and a negative number multiply to give a negative number, which is another number property that you might be familiar with. Let's think now, these green circles, let's be specific, they represent positive groups of, right? So here we've got two positive groups of -3. Let's let these orange circles represent -3. So we've got two groups of -3. So what we're saying is -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6. Or another way to say that would be -3 plus -3. So that gives us -6. Sometimes it can be helpful to think in terms of happiness and sadness. Imagine you're having a really bad day, you're at -3 happiness, then someone comes along and adds -3 happiness to you. You're going to become more sad. You're going to be at -6 happiness, right? All right, let's move on to some more interesting questions now. Let's think about the opposite situation. So let's think about why a positive number and a negative number gives a negative number, but in the other way, let's think about now having negative groups. So it's a bit interesting, sort of green before represented positive groups. Now we're going to think of negative groups. So what we've got in red is two negative groups, and then we've got +3 in each of those negative groups. So what we have now is -2 multiplied by 3. Now the whole group is negated. So we're negating or making +3 negative because the whole group is negative. And then we're adding another negative group. So we're adding negative +3. So adding another group of adding another negative group of +3. So in the same way, we get -3 minus 3 equals -6. But for a slightly different reason, right? It's very similar, obviously, but this time we had negative groups. In the previous one, we had negative counters. Okay, so now we can actually answer the question we're interested in. Why do two negative numbers multiply to give a positive number? Well, let's think. Now we've got negative groups, we've got negative counters. So we've got -2, it's the number of groups, multiplied by -3. So that's going to be -3. So we've got a negative group of -3, and then we've got a negative group of -3 here. If someone comes along and takes away your sadness, take away -3, this is now, whole thing is now +3. And then, someone else comes along again and they take away your negative, take away your sadness, you're now at 3 plus 3, which is 6. So actually a reasonably complicated idea. And the reason I wanted to cover it is because when you start doing algebra, you need to understand that when you multiply a negative pronumeral by another negative pronumeral, it becomes positive. So for example, -x multiplied by -y is +xy. So it's actually, not that easy necessarily. It's not that intuitive to think about why a negative number multiplied by a negative number is positive. But unfortunately, sometimes we don't get time to really step things through and think about things. So hopefully this has been an opportunity to sort of slow down and really grasp that idea of why two negative numbers multiplied give a positive number. All right. Good luck with all your studies.